thank you so much for joining us today for Evolve 2021 webinar series. Today's episode is on how to navigate the remote summertime blues, strategies for managing your mental health. So this is an important topic for us that we wanted to propose today. We know that this summer, thousands of students around the world will be re-embarking on a remote international internship. And although they are excited to start a new chapter in their professional career, they will be met with challenges such as competing responsibilities, distractions, prolonged COVID and Zoom fatigue, and time differences, to name a few. So today we want to speak about how do they set themselves up for success while taking into account their mental health. And my name is Sabrina Stark. I'm the University Partnership Manager for Absolute Internship and the host of the Evolve 2021 series. And I'm really excited for you to join us today from wherever you are. To give you a quick overview of Absolute Internship, in case you're new today, we have been working since 2009 with over 5,000 students. On average, we have 53 different nationalities in our program. And we work with over 800 companies worldwide in 30 different industries. So these are the cities where we have host companies students are interning with and interacting with this summer. We have Barcelona, Beijing, Hong Kong, Lisbon, London, Madrid, Montreal, Paris, Shanghai, Singapore, Stockholm, and Tokyo. And we're very excited to share that this summer we have students from 50 different nationalities interning remotely this summer. And we want to keep in mind and also, be respectful of everyone's different realities on the ground where they are. Given COVID, given vaccinations, given restrictions, we know it's not the same to intern remotely from California as it is from Argentina, as it is from India, or in Spain. So we just wanted to say thank you to everyone, and hopefully we'll be able to give you helpful tips that apply no matter where you are and no matter what your situation is this summer. So before we get into our session, we just wanted to review some data on mental health, working remotely, interning remotely, college students, to just kind of give a general picture of kind of where we are. So during the pandemic, as you know, most students had their classes switched to online, and 42% said that it was very challenging to stay motivated in their courses. So we can think that in some way it might be similar for internships as well, depending on how much they enjoy and love their projects and host companies. Again, risk of social isolation, it depends on many different factors. What is the place and size of your residence? So it's not the same to intern from a studio apartment, a one-bedroom apartment, or a full house with a yard or garden. Source of household income. Are students worried about having, enough income, being able to afford basic necessities, or is everything taken care of? Are they living alone, or are they living with other people? All of that influences their support network. And was somebody that they loved or that you love impacted by COVID? So there's so many different perspectives and realities that take into place here. 85.8% of students reported symptoms of anxiety, while they were learning remotely, and about 63% were considered mild cases. So just to keep that in mind for how students have been doing this past year. Now, when it comes to working at home, again, this can be very positive or negative depending on different factors. So, of course, the demands of the home environment. Do you have other responsibilities at home? Are you taking care of someone, or is it just you that you need to worry about? What sort of organizational support do you have in your home? Do you have to prepare and cook your meals? Does somebody do that for you? Like, there's all sorts of things involved in that. And then social connections external to work. Do you have social connections? Do you know people where you live? Do you have people that you're able to reach out to and connect with? Working at home, which is also like interning from home, is associated with lower social support, lower feedback feedback and greater role ambiguity, which increase exhaustion, okay, through his studies. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that this is more prevalent than if you are interning in person or working in person. We wanted to reach out to our student followers on Instagram to see what they were thinking about these topics. So we reached out last week with just some questions in our stories, and you can see that 70% said that working from home is mentally challenging. Okay, so 7 out of 10. If you're in a bad mood, and I found this one interesting, they said they prefer to be left alone. Almost 70% of students say I prefer to be left alone. And then should we be talking openly about mental illness? 100% said yes. Okay, yes, please. Like, we need to be talking about this. So we're really happy to see that, because that's our basis of the talk today. And then when we switched it over to LinkedIn, so a different social platform that has more, working professionals, maybe students that have graduated are working now, we asked, is remote work challenging? And, over 80% were like, actually, I've adapted, I like it, I prefer it. And then a smaller percentage said it affected my mental health. So there's a big difference between working professionals and students and interns in terms of their experience. And we're also seeing this with companies as well, that companies are loving the remote work. They're loving the flex work. Employees love this, but that's maybe not what students are looking for when it comes to an internship experience. And then what have they adopted to navigate their challenges? Physical exercise was the top one, and then finding work-life balance. So, now that you don't have to commute, you have more time to do other things that you love and enjoy, right? So we just wanted to share that feedback from social media before we get into our session today. So without further ado, I would like to have our three great speakers who kindly gave their time to be with us today to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll get into depth about each one of their stories. So Erin, if you don't mind just introducing yourself and letting us know a little bit about you and kind of what your perspective is.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin MacKay, and I am an international business student at George Brown College in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm going to talk a little bit about my remote internship experience that I had with Suites in the City. Absolute Internship placed me with this company. It's in the UK, just outside of London, England. There, I was a sustainable research analyst. I was able to pick my own title with the permission from my boss. Actually, when Absolute did my first interview, they asked which direction I wanted to go. There's a couple different categories that I could have chosen from, business development, marketing, HR, and such. I chose business development with a strong focus on sustainability, as that is my passion. So my personality type is, I'm very much an extrovert. I love meeting people, conversing with people. It gives me energy. I know a lot of introverts aren't exactly the same as that. I would also say that given the choice between like freedom and like freelance sort of work or something like more structured, then I would go with the latter, because I like deadlines. I like checking in with people and stuff like that. And my boss, Sarah at Suites in the City, was very accommodating of this. We generally checked in twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. So I would also say that although I do get very good grades and have a very good work ethic, I do get distracted quite easily. So that has been a little bit of a struggle working from home. But what I generally do to counter that myself anyway is like my earphones or my headphones. Just listening to really calm music helps me to focus a little bit more on my task at hand. So,
Thank you, Erin. No, thank you. We're gonna ask some more questions too to really dive into your experience.
okay.
But thank you. Yeah, I'll have Robert if you want to introduce yourself, and then Sharina, and then we'll get back to you, Erin, and go into depth. Yeah.
Sure. Sorry.
All right. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Robert Van Pelt. I am a graduate student at Boston College, and I'm a graduate assistant in the Office for International Programs here at Boston College as well. In addition to my role of being a graduate assistant, I'm also an admissions ambassador for the Lynch School of Education, which is the School of Education here at Boston College. And this past spring, I had the pleasure of working with Sabrina, as well as the interim director of the office here, Larry Pickner, in facilitating a spring virtual internship program with Absolute, where the three of us helped assist about 60 students or so through their spring virtual internship program. And while on paper, I may appear as a prototypical student who's doing everything and trying to set myself as a professional and continue on my professional career, it's been a bit of a challenge. And I think like everybody else here, I'm human at the end of the day, and I'm continuing to grow and support not only myself, but also the students that I'm trying to help serve. I think naturally for me, working remotely has been a little bit of a blessing and a curse. I think by nature, I'm more of an introverted person. And so at the onset of the pandemic, when we all were forced to turn to this virtual work environment, the idea of commuting to Zoom and not to an in-person setting was very much welcomed on my end. But it was also had some challenges associated as well. Before I started here at Boston College, I had spent the last 5 years as the assistant director of global and off-campus initiatives at Guilford College, which is a small private liberal arts institution here in the United States of America. And as much as demanding as that experience was, it did help set me up for success as far as being disciplined and scheduling and doing the things I need to do to be not only a successful graduate student, but also to assume the many responsibilities that I've had. But on the other side of that, outside of my professional and academic successes, it's been a bit of a challenge to keep my head on straight. Obviously, in the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm thinking of my family and my friends and making sure they're safe and that they're doing well as humanity continues to tackle this crisis. The big thing for me that I've continued to deal with, though, is the fact that I moved across the United States in order to start this program. I had spent the better part of the last decade living in North Carolina. And so moving from North Carolina to Massachusetts, I pretty much gave up my entire social structure and my outlets that I had used to channel my mental and emotional energy. And so unfortunately, no amount of casual Zoom calls or physical exercise or walking, listening to music around the reservoir here in Boston, or right next to Boston College, has been really helping with that. And then to compound that even more, it's been a struggle to deal with that on my own personal end and also turn around and support the students that I work with here at Boston College. I know that like many institutions, Boston College has had to kind of play the wait and see game as far as whether or not we're going to send students abroad or accept international students here at Boston College. And so that causes a lot of stress, not only for students and for parents who are trying to plan for the future, but also for the staff here who has all been impacted by COVID-19. And so as we've continued to work through this and continue to deal with these challenges, I think it's just been something that it's like I've been able to do a really good job at trying to keep the things that I need to keep on track of professionally and academically in check. But I think the things that are dealing with my own personal situations, such as maintaining a sleep schedule, trying to eat well, trying to exercise, trying to meet people and develop social connections in a place where I don't know anybody, has been the biggest challenge to moving to Boston.
Thank you, Robbie, for that introduction. And then Sharina, if you don't mind introducing yourself and kind of your background.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. I am Sharina Shandasani. I am a clinical psychologist and a therapist. I'm from Barcelona, Spain, but I currently live in Ibiza. 4 or 5 years ago, I also transitioned and I created my own business in coaching, personal development and transformational coach. So I became a remote worker by choice 4 or 5 years ago because I wanted to live a different type of lifestyle. However, eventually there are many challenges along the journey. Many have mentioned already, like the self-discipline, when to work, how to work, where you're going to work, the distractions, the stress, the uncertainty of what's happening tomorrow, what's happening the next day, where are my clients, or how am I actually going to distribute and balance my life out in other areas. Eventually, because of COVID, we're all humans, it has really impacted each and every one of us. You do face a little bit more of stress and anxiety just because it's so uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know the solution. So this keeps us more alert. And I myself have faced that as well. So yeah, I think this topic is very interesting. One of my main missions in life is to help break with mental health stigma and continuously promote our well-being, because I believe that if we have a healthy mind and a healthy body and a healthy soul, then we can really find this balance. And the last thing that I want to share before we begin is that we need to keep in mind that we're human. So our emotions and feeling lost or worried or stressed or concerned are very normal emotions to feel. So a lot of the times when we ignore them and we suppress them, we're actually intensifying them. So it's okay, whatever it is that you're feeling or going through. And it's really important just to acknowledge it and embrace it, and then figure out, all right, so what can I do now to help myself feel better, or to kind of control the situation a bit. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Shrina. We're really excited to dig deeper. So, Erin, we wanted to start with you. And you mentioned a little bit about you were interning for Sweets in the City. It's located in London. What sort of a time difference is that for you? What was or is your physical space, that you were interning from? What were your biggest struggles, challenges? Talk to us a bit more about your experience of being a remote intern. And I understand you were also kind of in lockdown, right, in Canada?
Yes, very true. I think that Ontario has had one of the longest lockdowns out there. So it's definitely been a struggle for a lot of people. But Sweets in the City, as you can see, I was lucky enough to work for a confectionery shop. And to be honest, initially, I wasn't sure that it was going to be a good fit. I'm like, business development and sustainability, how am I going to help this place with that? But it was a very rewarding experience. After even just like my initial talk with Sarah, my boss, I realized that it was a very good fit, and she wanted to become a lot more greener with her company. It was a 5-hour time difference. Generally, we would meet on Mondays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. my time, 3 p.m. her time. My workspace here at home varies a little bit. I do live in a 1-bedroom condo with my significant other, and he is a successful project manager. So generally with his meetings going back to back all the time, I usually let him have the living room. I stole it today for this important webinar, but generally I will be working from the bedroom. And in hindsight, I probably should have utilized my rollaway desk and foldable chair a little bit more, because that would have been kind of more business-like, I think. But sometimes I'd be just like lying on my tummy on the bed and trying to do my work. And sometimes you actually feel like having a nap doing that, because you just associate the bed and, you're going to sleep. So, but, like when I would start feeling lethargic like that, like I would sometimes just go for a quick walk, 10 to 15 minutes, get a breath of fresh air, see some nature and stuff like that, come back like refreshed. I think that, it's better than just like staring at the computer and not really getting anything done for a while. So my biggest struggles, was dealing with the motivation every once in a while. But it was so interesting what I did, the work that I did with this company. So that helped me a lot. But being an extrovert, as previously said, it is hard not being able to talk to people a lot, not seeing the actual office itself as well. But my boss and my coworker, Naomi, they were very accommodating about this. They took the computer, introduced me to all of my coworkers right off the bat. And near the end of my internship, actually, Naomi took me around and showed me what the office looked like, which helped me with one of the tasks that I was assigned. So that was good. In regards to achievements, there are 2 that I was especially proud of. I did introduce them to the possibility of becoming a certified B Corporation, which pretty much means it's a recognition for companies to show that they care about the environment, that they care about their employee well-being, and they care about their customers as well. So while I wasn't able to implement this within my short time with them, I have high hopes that in the next year or so that they will become certified. In addition to that, I created a CSR charter for them, a corporate social responsibility charter. No idea how to do that. I was very self-taught, learning all of this sustainability and environmental like education. I will eventually have formal education for that, but yeah, it was really interesting researching for all that sort of stuff. So yeah, sustainability being my passion was my biggest motivation, I would say.
And Erin, what would you say for students like coming at it from a student intern perspective? Like you've already finished your internship, but we have students just starting, right, for this summer. What would you recommend to them if they're struggling with motivation? We know that so many of them do. What is your advice? And then also like from an extroverted person's perspective, what would you suggest?
I would suggest that right off the bat, in your initial interview with Absolute Internship, be very honest about what you want, because they're very accommodating. I was scared to mention that I wanted to do sustainability type stuff. I didn't know if I would be qualified for it or whatnot, but business development worked very well with my program, International Business at George Brown. I had a lot of like business knowledge that I could use, market entry strategies and whatnot. And my job was very flexible, which was quite nice. Besides the check-ins, I could pretty much like work when I wanted. So if I felt like I was going to be more productive during the evening, then sometimes I'd put some hours in the evening. Sometimes if even I was doing 2 classes at the same time as my internship. So if I was bogged down with a lot of studying for that, then I would move some of my work that I did for the internship to the weekend. Sometimes I'd have like some extra time on a Saturday, and I was happy to do it. So, and generally, I think with the time difference, one big thing that worked for me as well was generally sending my boss in the work that I had done in the evening, so that when she woke up and went to work, she would be able to look at it right away rather than wait for our meeting, which would be 3 p.m. her time, and her day's almost done by then. Oh, and I guess like I would also say that I'm not too big on working out myself. I really should be better at that. I like sports better. If I could play sports, then that's more ideal. But due to COVID, we haven't had that option quite as much. But generally, like especially around exams and whatnot, I go running up and down the stairs in my apartment to get the blood flowing, because you retain more information and have like better focus that way. So just moving your body a little bit somehow.
That's great. Thank you, Erin. And then, Robert, just wanted to switch gears a little bit and focus more on your experience of being a student, but also advising students, mentoring students who are also going through their, remote experience. I believe their classes were remote. Is that right? Plus their internship was remote. And so, yeah, if you can just talk to us a little bit more about your experience, both professionally and personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for me, my my experience being a first year in the Master's International Higher Education program at Boston College, definitely, as I alluded to earlier, was very much a transition. I actually, in order to kind of set myself up for this, took a lot of notes and kind of what's the word I want to use? Reference from a lot of the institutional relations managers that I used to work with in my previous role at Guilford College, and their roles are primarily remote and they're always on the road. And so I called up a couple who I knew and I said, hey, how have you been successfully able to travel to multiple environments and still maintain a solid work schedule? And the biggest adjustment that I made for myself working remotely was to set up a place and space and develop physical cues, for lack of a better way to describe it, to say that I'm in the office and that this is now my workspace. And so I specifically have a desk within my room that's basically my work desk. I don't do anything else other than be at my work desk when I want to do work. And when I either no longer want to do work or I've completed everything that I do, I specifically walk away from that desk and I go to either another part of my apartment or another part of my room. That's been a little bit more challenging because I do live with 3 other roommates, and just by happenstance, all of them work in either social care or in healthcare. And so as we all have managed this this pandemic, we want to be respectful to give each other appropriate spaces to have sensitive conversations if we need to, and also to give us space in our small apartment to kind of spread out and relax and give each other some personal space and some personal time to do what we need to do. But thinking more of my professional role, moving into working at the Office of International Programs and also with Sabrina on our virtual internship program, ultimately my role relatively remained the same as if regardless of whether I was online or in person. The cornerstone of our educational mission here at Boston College is to challenge students to think critically and to grow personally, professionally, and academically, to be better people than when they came in, and ultimately to give them the tools to be successful in whatever avenue they take after Boston College, and be proud that they had a Boston College education. Just a couple of things that I was thinking about in preparation for this session, of things that I've shared that I'm thinking about in my role that I use to better help support my students, both through the virtual internship program and through the pre-advising process that I support here, is firstly to try to find a way to connect students with with what they're doing right now and how it connects to where they want to be. I think for me and myself, one of the reasons why working virtually and working in this period has been perhaps a little bit easier for me is that I see how what I'm doing now is ultimately helping me to get where I want to be. So for myself, like, I'm trying to return to the field of international education, either in some sort of research position or some sort of study abroad or outbound mobility position. And I understand that what I'm doing now in my master's program, being a graduate assistant at the Office of International Programs and working at the admissions office in the Lynch School, is helping me get to where I want to be. And that is what keeps me motivated. A lot of students who I work with here at Boston College and some students who I've spoken to may see the end goal, but they're not necessarily connecting the pieces together to say, how is what I'm doing right now helping me get to where I want to be? And so if you are in a position where you are advising students, or you're in a position where you're helping students, that's something that I would really stress on and try to help with students if they're struggling to either see the purpose of the experience that they're doing, or trying to understand what it is they're doing that helps them get to where they want to be.
Yeah, that's great
Secondly,
advice. Sorry, I just wanted to say, Robbie, that was great advice, because we did have people ask before the session, what is the most useful thing that career services can do to support students around resiliency? And what you're saying is, like, help them see the connections and kind of the end goal of why you're doing this, right?
exactly, yeah. And so I like, at least in my experience and my background, if you can get students to see why they are doing what they're doing and how this helps them get to where they want to be, that kind of pit you fall into of a lack of motivation or a lack of discipline or a lack of understanding kind of how this adds to your personal, professional, or academic career, that's going to help kind of connect the dots in not only your mind, but also that student's mind, and may help them be motivated as they continue through whatever they're working on, whether it be a virtual internship or a project or a research grant, or whatever it is that they're working on. And especially within the context of the pandemic, and I know this is challenging, particularly for those of you who are at larger institutions, but I would really emphasize on trying to minimize the power distance between you as an institution member or a staff member at a higher education institution and a student and kind of minimizing that as best as you can. The reason why I say that and what I mean when I say that is undergraduate students, and particularly students here at Boston College, hold the institution and individuals who work at the institution, regardless of your position, in such a high level of esteem and prestige that it could seem scary or fearful to try to approach the institution if you're having any problems. And so if you step down to a student's level and try to come at them, not necessarily from a top-down structure, but more from the side to say, hey, we're in this together and I'm going to support you through whatever it is that you're working through right now, I found that students are going to be a lot more accepting of that structure and minimizing of that power distance. I'll share with you a story real quick that Sabrina, myself, and Larry dealt with over the course of our spring virtual internship program. We had a student who shall remain nameless who was having a very challenging time with his internship and was having a very challenging time understanding the requirements that the internship supervisor was requiring of him. And so instead of trying to come down to this top-down structure to say, hey, the internship manager says you're not doing what you need to do, why aren't you doing this? Like, what's going on? Da, 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 da. I decided to meet with the student one-on-one and have a conversation to try to understand where this student was coming from. And within 5 minutes of talking to that student, you can see that this student was at a breaking point. He was in a 20-hour a week work internship. He was working a job on the side. He was taking a full course load here at Boston College. He was living at home and dealing with issues within his family. And within 5 minutes, you could tell that he was in a very emotionally fragile place. And so I sat down with him for about 20 minutes and I just had the opportunity to talk with him, give him an opportunity to vent about his frustrations, give him an opportunity to show some of the work that he's done. And it really was excellent work that he contributed to the organization. And really, ultimately, what we found out was that it was just a miscommunication between the internship supervisor and what the student had done, and that their expectations were different. Ultimately, without getting too far into it, myself, Sabrina, and Larry, we eventually rectified the situation and got that student to a very happy place with his internship, so much to the point where his internship supervisor asked him to come back this summer to intern for the organization. And so we'll call that a success story, but really the moral of that story is especially at this time right now, I would encourage you to approach students from the side and be inclusive as opposed to a top-down structure. As I said, I know it's a little bit challenging if you're at a larger institution and you're working with a larger student population, but just some food for thought. And then lastly, just as a quick note, because I know we're sensitive on time here, just remember that your strongest students might be the ones that are suffering the most. And so even though on your reflections that you may have them do or on their internship supervisor reports, they may seem like they're doing the best things and they're the ideal students that you might have, just remember that they might be the ones who are struggling the most. And so as you are dealing with the students who are taking the most of your attention, don't forget to put attention on the students who are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but more important, celebrate the accomplishments of what the students who have been doing right and everybody in your cohort for a virtual internship or whatever project you're working on, and raise them up during this challenging time.
Thank you, Robbie. That's so great. And I wanted to ask just one question that came in before the session, that someone asked, how do you contact remote interns who are not being responsive, and methods to offer support, right, before concerns arise? So I was curious what you had to say, and also Erin, what your perspective was as a student. So it can happen that you're trying to reach someone, they're ghosting you, you're trying all these different methods, and we can't just like go and see them in person. So what sort of advice do you have for that?
Like, at least in my perspective, there's two types of approaches I take to communication. There is the formal educational approach, and any student or professional knows what I'm talking about when I be like the email that sounds very professional, that's kind of outlines what you need to do and kind of details the situation and says like, hey, like whenever you get this email, please contact me. And then there's the second form of email that I sent that's a little bit more casual, comes from a little bit more of an emotional standpoint, and really tries to come from a place of understanding and a place of inclusiveness to say, hey, like, understanding you're going through a challenging time right now, regardless of whether you as the institution member or whoever's responsible knows what's going on or not, and just trying to be inclusive. That's going to be contextual depending on the group that you're working with, the institution that you're at, the sociocultural background that you're a part of. But at least in my experience, both professionally and working at Boston College, coming in from that inclusive angle to say, hey, like, let me try to understand where you're coming from, understand the situation, and then come to some sort of compromise or solution to where we can get you back on pace to where you need to be, has been successful. Erin, I don't know if you want to add or share anything.
I think you said most of it there, Robbie. I think just making sure that you're in communicate, like try to stay in communication before it gets to a really bad part like that. Like I was lucky enough to have WhatsApp chats every once in a while with my supervisors, so we could see how each other were doing. Like I really appreciated that my boss would always ask like, how are you, before we actually got started on the work. So that was really appreciated. And I know, like, you know, us extroverts need like a lot of socialization, but I think during this COVID thing, like even my boyfriend, who is an introvert, this has even affected him now. So it's been a long 2 years, definitely, with this pandemic.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to mention on top of what you guys said, Robbie, I know you do the official email and then like the casual email. I also do like text messages. I leave voicemails. I even like record videos of myself and like send it to them by email. So sometimes I think students after so many they're like, okay, if I don't respond, like she's not going to stop. So that's how I
I
get
was
people to answer.
Yeah, I was just gonna just reinforce the point that Erin and Sabrina made. Is definitely the regular check-ins are something that really will help students from falling into a position where they're not going to be responsive or be in a position where they're just going to ignore you. And during our virtual internship program this past spring, I actually really want to thank Sabrina and her team at Absolute, who did regular check-ins with our students to say, hey, how are things going? What's going on? Is there anything we need to talk about? Tell me about what you're doing. And in those regular check-ins did help our students persist through the internship process, persist through doing what they need to do, and ultimately made them successful internship students for this program.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. That's important. I think if you're working with students and they're doing internships, having that set up beforehand is really helpful. Of the expectation of like we're going to be checking in, and we had them, book these times ahead of time, so they knew when it was coming. They got a reminder that we were having a check-in. If they didn't show up to the check-in, they would get an email. I'm like, hey, I'm online, waiting for you. So they always knew that someone was going to be there to talk to them, to check in, and kind of keeping them accountable in a way for checking in. So yeah, that's great. That's great. I wanted to just go ahead and give the floor to Sharina, and your professional opinion on taking care of your mental health. I don't know if you want to comment on anything that Erin and Robbie were talking about in their personal experiences, professional experiences, and kind of what would you suggest to students that are interning remotely this summer?
Yes. Thank you, Erin and Robert, for the sharing and the insights. I think you've pretty much covered the most important parts of when it comes to eventually being a student and going into the workspace now. And so the first thing that I want to share is that we have to keep in mind that students are newbies in this situation, right? It's the first time that they're working. They have all these expectations, all these insecurities, doubts, fears, questions. So it is important and very normal that they need a very strong support system behind, because when if we've been for a long time working, or if we've been in a situation that is common to us, that's familiar, we kind of know how to manage things around, how to ask for something to our manager, how to research something that we don't know how to do, how to ask for these things, and build also this resilience and assertiveness, right? But we have to keep in mind, again, like students are just kind of thrown into the wild, into the new. So it's important to acknowledge this for them and also for the ones around them, so like counselors and other professionals. So yeah, I'm just going to go over some of the ways or some of the tools and exercises that you can be already applying when it comes to remote working and taking care of your mental health. So going back to, for example, working at home, right? This is like remote working. It is a situation that's not familiar. We're not going to any place in an environment where you're in an office and you're around people. So for some people, that's a plus point, but we have to make sure that we're constantly sending messages to our system. So if you're just waking up at whatever time in your pajamas, in your bed, and doing the work, we have a conflict internally, right? Your body, your mind is going to understand that, oh, this is where I sleep, this is where I watch Netflix, this is where I eat, and this is where I work as well. So we are not as motivated or kind of fresh or have the energy to be productive. So it's really important to have a fixed sleeping hours where you are going to bed at pretty much the same time, and you have a sleep hygiene eventually where you're getting off distractions and social media and all these gadgets, because we need to slow down our system. We have to calm our system down, so not be in this alerted state all the time. And make sure that you're also waking up at pretty much the same time, and that you're giving yourself at least, this is something that I do as well, I give myself at least an hour and a half to taking care of myself, right? It's really important that you feel that you've taken care of, that you're nurtured, that you've covered basic needs. So like a good breakfast. If you do meditation, yoga, or whatever, that's also perfect. Maybe you want to journal and get your mind clear, write your thoughts down. Some gratitude is also nice. And also physical activity in the morning is really good to kind of activate your happy chemicals. So even if you don't want to go to the gym or do a specific sports, and even if you can't leave your home, there are many ways for you to just activate your system. So a book that's really interesting is The Miracle Morning. I'm not sure you guys heard about it, but basically you can be doing a lot of these activities in the morning, and you just give 1 minute or 2 minutes for each of the things. So you would be maybe doing your gratitude list, you would be doing like 20 jumping jacks, and you're activating your system, you're having a cold shower, you are, I don't know, reaching out to a friend, like you're doing some activities that are like feel good activities and getting yourself prepared for the day. So it's your system understands like, oh, I'm already covered. Like I've already taken care of my mental health and my social environment. And then you're going for work. When it comes to the work scene, I think, Robert, you mentioned this. It's really important to create that space in your home, which is just for work. So you get ready, you don't wear your pajamas, you get ready, you do all your morning routine, and you come to your workspace, and you just use that space to work. And even if you have a small place, I think, Robert, you mentioned that you kind of build your own desk inside your room. That's perfectly fine. The whole point is that you are telling yourself that this is the place to work. And so now I'm focused on the work part. And then I'm doing something else. But if you're 24/7 in the same space where you're eating, you're working, you're everything, you're just telling yourself that you don't have like working hours, right? You can be here forever. And so that's why you procrastinate, you take longer times to do things, and you're just there for a very long time. When it comes to the work scene, I would recommend, especially because I also work remotely, to being organized and productive, it's important to take constant breaks. Our mind cannot be focused on a particular task for a very, very long time. So it's important that we disconnect and come back to what we're doing with a fresh mind. So if you guys haven't heard about it, there's this Pomodoro technique where you're basically deep working or working in a project, fully concentrated for like 20 minutes, and then you're having 10-minute breaks where you're out of this workspace. You're either gone to get a coffee or a smoothie or just get some fresh air, and then you're back again. And you can schedule this how much ever time you need it. I also use this other app that's called Coffee Break app. So I schedule it myself. I do 45 minutes of work, and then I take 10 minutes breaks. You can do 60 minutes, whatever you're working on. So it's a great way for you to also manage your time and your tasks, right? So if you set like the alarm or the technique for like 20 minutes or 40 minutes, you know that you have these 40 minutes to complete this particular task. And you will be surprised by how much you actually get done in this period of time. It's really about you setting like time blocking, right? You're blocking the time for it. If you don't set any particular time, you're just going to be there for hours and hours and just focusing on that one thing. So it's really about understanding how your mind works as well. So it's super interesting. Another thing I think we've mentioned is the communication part. Sorry. It's important. It's eventually because of the situation that we're living. It's normal to go face stress, burnout, concerns, loneliness, and feel very anxious, mainly because we're alone. We don't have the social connection, or we don't feel connected to people. And as humans, we need the deep connections. We need to feel that we can emotionally connect with people. So if you're a student, it would be super nice to kind of get in these platforms and create small groups where you can kind of, keep accountable and have regular meetings or kind of check in with yourselves. And also with your counselors, I would recommend counselors to kind of help the student express themselves and have regular check-ins, what their weekly goals are, maybe what personal challenges they have, help them kind of find their strengths, maybe even teach them about emotional intelligence or mindfulness practice, how they can really calm their system down when they need it, and let them know that it's okay that, maybe they need extra 20-minute breaks to recover, to come back. And I think when it comes to remote work, that is a plus. That's actually a benefit, that you can actually kind of distribute the way that you're doing your work. So don't be afraid, I would say, to communicate whatever you're going through, whatever you're feeling. If there's a day that you feel a little bit more lost or heavy, or sad or whatever it is, you have a support system. Something that I recommend a lot of my clients to do is like I kind of help them visualize a circle or you can draw it or you can imagine it. And I would think about all those people in my life that I already have, that are existing, that I can rely on. Because a lot of times we forget that we have like a brother, a cousin, a teacher, a tutor, an ex-alumni, people that we know or they we could connect with that can be our support system. And we can focus on them and we can nourish this relationship and know when we can rely on them as well. Sometimes we feel we're alone. And going back to the questions that you asked, Sabrina, on your Instagram, when people said that they rather be alone when they're feeling down, that is very common. And that's because we feel that we're the only ones going through these emotions. We're the only ones that don't know how to do it. We don't want to show that we're feeling low. So I'd rather just deal with it myself. And that's because maybe we lack the group, the support system. And so I believe that maybe the counselors or the professors can create a way that every week there is some type of something like this, maybe a session where you come and maybe you share how your week has been, or just maybe weekly challenges. Also helps people kind of keep accountable, keep this motivation going. Something else that we mentioned about motivation, let me know when my time's kind of running. I could go on forever. What I do is in the end, it's really about mastering yourself and getting to know yourself, right? We're all different. We all have different conditions. We all have different ways of doing things. So what I do is like, I try to make it fun and play kind of games with myself, right? Like with my inner self. So I would recommend you doing agreement forms with yourself. So I would tell myself, all right, if I finish this essay, then I have 1 hour of Netflix. Or if I go for a coffee break with my friends, then I have to do this and this. And by you sending these commands to yourself, it's like, oh, all right, so I did this, but then I did this. And if I did this, then I have that. And it's kind of like when if you're a parent and you're with kids, you kind of play this game where you're doing the obligation at the same time you're getting a reward. Our mind functions like this. We need to give ourselves these small rewards, these compensations. So it's okay for you to kind of play around like this with yourself and set these little contracts and agreement forms. And I think, Robert, you also mentioned this of knowing your why. And I believe that the counselors or the should help like students kind of let them know what their vision is or what their why is and why they're doing what they're doing, and maybe even help them set different challenges throughout different weeks where they can be focusing on a particular task. Like in a job, you probably have, I don't know, some admin stuff. So maybe there's one particular week or 2 weeks where the challenge is to focus on how well you do the admin work and how do you organize yourself. Or maybe the next week is how do you kind of set up meetings and how do you prepare for meetings or presentations. Like when we have these smaller tasks and smaller challenges, we enter in the state flow, right? When our goals and our challenges are not way too far out of our reach, they're kind of challenging, but they're kind of also aligned with where we stand, like our conditions and our knowledge. So it's kind of like giving us little baby steps so we can at the same time go for them. We have a little bit of challenge. We're motivated. We're achieving it. So we're celebrating this. And then it's the next thing, next thing, next thing. And I believe this also helps us keep us motivated.
Thanks, Trina. I wanted to mention from what you were saying, like before you were talking about, COVID and how this situation, like, yeah, we're going in ups and downs, like waves, but we don't know the end and we can't control that. And it's really, it's really hard to not know, like, okay, what is the end date of this? When do we move on? When do we turn the page? But at least in like a work environment or an internship environment, you do have end dates for things, and you can help students or yourself also stay focused on those goals. And I remember having check-ins, with students being like, okay, what did you achieve this month? What do you want to achieve next month? And then when you speak again, you're like, okay, you said you wanted to do this. Where are you? And, many times they would be like, oh, I don't remember that I said that. Or, that's true. Oh, wow, I really did do all those things. And they start feeling really good about themselves. And then you say, hey, there's 1 month left, or there's X amount of time left. What do you want to get out of this internship? And then they start thinking about like, okay, what is it that I want out of this? And I'm like, okay, how are you going to do it? So kind of dividing, like you said, those tasks up, like the time up as well, to see like, yeah, I'm already halfway through, or I have 2 weeks left, or, that you have a specific amount of time, and, and like Robert was saying earlier, like celebrating the successes and being like, you've made it this far, like you've come through all these things. And I think that's just so powerful if someone else tells you that, like, I'm so proud of you, for all the things you've achieved, for all the difficulties you've overcome, that maybe for you it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal, that you've been doing this. So anyway, I just wanted to say, I think that connects really well with what all of you guys have been saying.
Yeah, I would even take it a step further. So when you have your goal or like the vision out of the whole internship, then you break it down to smaller short-term goals, then into, all right, well, if this is the goal for this month, then what are the tasks that I have to be doing? And in those tasks, then you kind of have like actions to take. So it really is very simplified for you. And so it's easier for you to like, all right, so this week, all I have to do is this, this, and this. Next week, this, and this. And then by the end of the month, you've already achieved your goal. And this just feels really good. It feels like you're advancing. So yeah, I think this is powerful.
Thank you. I didn't know if you could share the information in the chat, Sharina, of the apps that you mentioned.
Oh, yes.
I think they're talking about the book that you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
To share that. And I wanted to open it up for questions from the audience that they'd like to ask any of you about your experiences, or about remote working, or the student reality. We'd love to have you guys ask your questions that you'd like to have today. So feel free to either, write in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, we'd be happy to hear you as well. So we just wanted to open up this space for any questions.
Can I take the word if it's okay? Okay. Hi, I'm Begum. I'm tuning in from Istanbul, Turkey at the moment. I just got in from work and made it on time, so I'm happy to have caught the whole session. So currently, I'm working with two full-time interns at the International Student Advising Office of Istanbul University, and I've worked with interns since 2016. It's a lovely experience for me every time. But this year with the pandemic, it became very, very difficult, especially when in Turkey we were in full lockdown and we worked completely remotely. I caught myself kind of let's say, taking on more responsibility because I found it so much harder to delegate tasks when I was completely isolated from them and not seeing them face to face. It felt easier just to do them myself rather than to explain the whole process completely online, kind of giving them a call because Zoom meetings kind of came in a bit later. But, finding that balance was very difficult. Just like one kind of long-winded question that I want to ask to the whole panel. One, how do we kind of balance our own mental health while trying to check in with someone else who might be going through similar things or different experiences? Because I do feel personally responsible for the interns that do come in because they're coming in and trying to get the best out of an experience here. But at the same time, I have to kind of keep myself balanced and advise them as best as I can. That's one thing. And another thing, for the ones that did go for an internship, what did your supervisors do or do you think could have done to make you feel like you were getting the best out of your remote internship? Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing questions. Sharina, I don't know if you wanted to start first on what she was asking about. How do I check in with people who need me, and then also taking care of my mental health, and also this problem I struggle the same of not being able, to delegate. It's faster if I just do it myself, and then you're isolated. So yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, and I actually resonate with this. I'm a therapist, so like I'm constantly having sessions and giving all that I have to others, or listening or being there for them. And at the same time, I have to kind of protect my own mental health. What I have found, or I believe that's super important, is exactly this: knowing that you're also human and that you also need to give yourself and nurture yourself. So I made a non-negotiable thing with myself, agreement, where I'm making sure that every single day, maybe it's an hour sometimes, maybe it's 2 hours a day, that I'm just blocking that time for myself, knowing that if I am in a mental state that's positive and healthy, the better I can do my job as well, and the better I transmit to others, which is what I do. This is my mission. So it's a non-negotiable. It's something that I kind of have to do to be on service. And this may be decluttering my mind through journaling, where I'm just writing. I have my own maybe mentors. Physical activity for me has been massive, where you're really, really just taking it all out. Mindfulness meditations, where every single day I try to like really do also breath work, where you are calming your system down and reaching to that state where you're like, all right. Something that works for me a lot is reminding myself, and I tell myself one thing at a time. So it really helps me kind of be in the present. And I take, if it's, now it's this session, now I'm here in this session. If then after an hour I have some other student or a client, then it's them. And I really try to have enough space in between, so I kind of refresh and generate again the energy for them. And the last thing that I'm going to share, that it's actually scientifically proven, is to shake. Somatic experience is amazing to kind of regenerate and regulate your system. So what I do is I put one song and I just shake it all off. It's funny, it's actually proven. It's proven for trauma patients and stuff. Animals, when they go through stress, they kind of shiggle and wiggle to kind of regulate their system. And so humans do the same. So I found this super helpful to kind of, all right, like shake it all off, and I'm here now for what I have to do. So I hope this helps.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to add as well, and then we can let Erin and speak about her experience interning. Also, I think, like everyone mentioned, having set hours that you work, because I'm the first one to be like, I work, until 5, and then but somebody wants to speak at 6 o'clock, I'll make it happen, and then somebody else wants at 7 o'clock. Okay, I'll change it to 7, and like, especially when you work across time zones, it's very easy to be like, okay, I'll make an exception, and so when I see that on my calendar too, that like I'm starting to have all these events outside of normal working hours, it's also a cue to myself that like, hey, you're going to start feeling, overwhelmed soon. You're going to start feeling tired soon. And why is that? Because you're working later, because you're starting earlier, because you're not respecting, right, your time. So I think that's another thing of keeping in mind, of kind of having, I know it's really hard to have that final end time, because you're like, well, if I just did one more thing today, then it's done, right? So that's something I think also that can really help. And when you're working with students, because it's so hard not to want to just add one more, right? Like I can do it today, no? But Erin, please talk to us about what was really helpful with your supervisor and your interning.
I think that a lot of flexibility on both our parts was very beneficial. Sarah of Sweets in the City does still have a pretty small business. And so she has just been getting out there and trying to do a bunch of market entry into so many different countries. So we wouldn't be able to meet those 2 times during the week that we had scheduled. And I would sometimes be really bogged down. I'm like, look, I've got a midterm that's very, very important, or a final and stuff. So sometimes we wouldn't be able to meet because of me as well. So just being really understanding and flexible with the schedules, meeting at different times. And I do understand that like communication is harder and it seems like more lengthy, like when you can't just like be like, hey, office person over there. Like it's like when you're working through the computer, working in a remote sort of thing, like, oh, I got to write a whole email that's going to take like way longer. I totally understand that. But I guess for me anyway, like Sarah actually had me half the time talking to Naomi, one of the other coworkers there. So she would split the time. I wouldn't be able to meet with both of them all the time. I actually asked them at one point, are you like Clark Kent and Superman? Like you can't be in the same place at the same time. So just, I don't know, I guess like trying to still get those Zoom calls and stuff somehow, the best I got.
Thank you.
I want to be sensitive of time because I know we're just approaching that witching hour, but to directly answer that question, it's a combination of kind of what Sharina said and what I mentioned earlier. One, recognize that everybody is a human at the end of the day, and we're all learning and kind of working through the pandemic as well as our personal and professional challenges that come with that. But a technique that I have found to be very helpful in my own professional life is trying to show particularly interns, and I used to work with a rotating group of student workers in my previous role at Guilford College, a little bit of how what they're doing fits into the process of your workflow, and a combination of minimizing that power distance between yourself as that supervisor and that intern while still remaining that boundaries, but also showing how what you are doing and kind of how you are doing it is ultimately helping the institution or the organization that you're working for. I'm thinking of an old student worker now, who I won't name in this call, who worked for the Guilford College Study Abroad office for 3.5 years and was a phenomenal student, came in with a really unique perspective and was really interested about international education and how that process is made. And because she had an interest in international education and was entertained potentially as a career, myself and my former director, Daniel Diaz, who's the director of Study Abroad at Guilford, brought her into the flow a little bit and kind of showed her a little bit of the pieces that we were working with and how some of the things that we were assigning her to do ultimately fit in that workflow. And so what that ultimately turned out is, and you'll find this regardless if it's student workers or interns, is that they're ultimately curious and they want to learn more. And not only do they want to learn more, but they ultimately want to contribute. And so we ended up, by the end of the time that she worked for us as a student worker, actively contributing and building on the things that we were trying to develop institutionally for the office. And ultimately, it turned out to be a phenomenal success story. She now works for the Study Abroad office at Elon University. And I would just really focus on minimizing that power distance and being inclusive of interns as workers in your office.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely. I used to be a student employee on campus. So for me, it was a very quick transition as well. So I completely relate to that. And recently, I've just been giving them more responsibility gradually, and that has really benefited me and them as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I know people might still be thinking, please feel free to send us an email afterwards. We'll be sending out the recording and also all of the resources that Sharina shared today, different tips, contact information as well if you guys would like to reach out after the session and have more like one-on-one questions with any of our panelists. I know they're happy to help, and for us as well, if you have any questions, we'd love to help you. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it, and we wish everyone a really successful summer, interning remotely, working remotely, whatever you might be doing and wherever you are. So thank you so much for being here today.